Right, hello and welcome to this webinar where we'll be exploring Microsoft 365, but specifically Business Standard versus Business Premium. What are you really paying for with the differences, and is it worth it? So there will be a Q&A session at the end. So this is quite a top level webinar. So we won't be going into the real depths and details of it, but we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if there's any areas that you aren't sure of, or maybe we haven't answered, then do please use the chat function throughout, and then we'll get to the Q&A towards the end. And also just to mention that if you're watching this as a recorded, we've recorded this in December 2025, so features and pricing may be different depending on when you're watching it. So right, okay, so what will this webinar help you decide? So is premium really worth the extra cost, and are there risks if you stay with Microsoft Business Standard rather than upgrading to premium? So that's always the sort of the big questions. So just quickly, who's your host? So I'm Giles Cleverly. Since graduation from Portsmouth University with a degree in business economics, I've bought, built and sold over a dozen businesses. So I've got a lot of knowledge when it comes to from a business perspective, from, as I say, being a business owner and not just from a technician's perspective, which obviously a lot of the time with IT companies, it's usually from a tech perspective. But I founded Syn-Star in 2002. So for over 20 years, I've been helping UK businesses with getting more from their technology and keeping them cyber secure as the threat landscape continually evolves. And it's obviously massively changed since I started back in 2002. So right, why this webinar is important to decision makers. So all UK businesses have the same biggest risks. Number one, cyber attacks. The risks are rising. There is more chance of you getting a cyber attack than there is someone actually breaking into your physical premises. So it is the number one risk to your business from that perspective. Also, employees not being able to work. So in terms of, let's say, the second biggest risk is downtime or just inefficient technology. Then the third is data loss, things like ransomware, physically losing data if it gets corrupted. And then finally, but maybe some people do think it's the first one, which is losing clients and your reputation. So hopefully we're always going to try and look at those four main areas of risk when we're making these decisions. So let's try and attack this from the high level first of all, which is the main features against your cost, because that is usually the main question that we get asked. So if we look from a top level base, if we talk about features first of all, so Business Standard and Business Premium, they are the two main packages that Microsoft offer. There are obviously lots of other ones. If you've got questions and you're unsure, then you can message me afterwards or maybe in the Q&A. But for these, when we're looking at the standard things that you probably use day to day, they have the same. So they both got your email exchange functionality. So email, which is your front line, which is your Outlook, or depending on what device you're using, the exchange part of the back that does all of the, sending, receiving emails and the data, etc. Then that comes into with your calendar, and then shared calendars, etc. Then you've got Teams. Then underneath that, you've got your main applications that have been around for a long time. They are your office applications, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, forms, bookings, etc., etc. So they've all got those same baselines. And then also they've got the same amount of storage as well, whether it's SharePoint, which is shared across your company's tenant, or OneDrive, which is it's similar to SharePoint, but it's more of it's from an individual perspective. So they've both got those. But from today's standpoint, as I say, December 25, the standard monthly pricing for these is you've got the standard is £11.52, or the business premium is £20.28. So effectively about £8.50 roughly difference in price. So if you've got, let's say, 10 employees, then £85 different if you were to change them all from standard to premium. So that's the kind of where we're at from a decision making process. But top level, they've got exactly the same features. So what are the main differences? So there's a lot more under the bonnet and additions when it comes to business premium. So as I say, standard, email, office apps, OneDrive, Teams. Whereas what Premium is more about is it's got advanced security, it's got Intune, which is your sort of overarching device management. It's got Defender for Business, and it's got Azure AD Premium. So there are a few other bits, but these are the main things. So what's only in Premium that you might not see? There are 6 main things that you get with Premium. Now, things like Intune, for example, you can buy them separately with separate licenses. So we're not saying you have to get Premium just to get these features. But whereas if you buy them individually, then they're a lot more expensive than just upgrading to Premium. So if we look at these, we're going to look at all of these in more detail, but effectively you've got Microsoft Defender for Business, Intune, Azure AD, conditional access and multi-factor authentication policies. You've got remote wipe for lost, stolen devices, and then you've got endpoint detection and response. So they're your main big sort of 6 differences. So let's have a look at each of those. So Defender. So this is mainly for threat detection and antivirus. It's an endpoint detection and response program, which essentially means it will go on to the individual endpoint device and it will look around for differences and it will try and block cyber attacks and brute force entry trying to get into the device. So it's very much the device that it's installed on. It does give visibility into suspicious behavior on the company devices. But what I would say is that it's not a managed endpoint, which means it's a general endpoint as opposed to a managed one where you've got people that are at the other end looking at the alerts, you know, and really being proactive with it. So it's not managed, but it is quite a good standalone product. And it also works with Windows on Macs, Android and iOS, because a big thing with Premium is that it also protects the mobile devices as well. So that's why it's working on Android and iOS, essentially iPhones or iPads is quite an important one. However, one thing to bear in mind with Defender is it was reported that in 2024, Defender was one of the most attacked platforms from a cybersecurity perspective. So it is a popular one for the hackers to try and attack. So that is just one point of purpose. So second big feature that it's got is Intune. So think of Intune as your remote control for all company devices, whether your team is in the office, working remotely, or using personal phones for work. So the 3 main capabilities is you've got device management, which is again, well, more MDM, so mobile device management. You can remotely wipe or lock lost or stolen devices. You can enforce passwords, encryption, and security settings. So this is particularly good if you've got a lot of remote workers that are not necessarily within that kind of the domain within your office. Obviously, a lot of offices might have beefed up security, you know, things like firewalls and things. Whereas if you've got a lot of workers that are maybe working from home or working, say, in an internet cafe on public Wi-Fi, then, you know, the chance of their devices potentially being stolen is higher because you as the company can't necessarily, you know, you won't know where they are, etc., etc. So it is quite good from that side of things. App management as well. So mobile app management, so you can control how business apps like Outlook, Teams and OneDrive are used on personal devices. So generally, again, we would always recommend that your individuals, your team use business-owned devices so that you can enforce a lot more security on them. But if it is someone's personal device, then obviously you can beef up their personal devices cybersecurity. So but you can also, with Intune, the good thing is you can actually say what is business data, and then you can remove only company data from the personal device without touching any of the private info. So it does enable you to do that if that's how you set Intune up. So it is quite good for that. Again, depending on what type of business you are and what devices that you allow people to use, or whether you as a company just provide them. So, and then just other things like you can automatically apply security policies. So things like you would make sure that the device has antivirus before anyone's allowed to log into your Microsoft 365. So there's various things we can do, and also you can make sure the devices are compliant, which again, depending on which industry you're in, is really important. You may actually find that you have to get Intune, depending on which industry you're in. So, but if we look at, say, a case study for Intune, you could ask the question, what happens when a laptop gets lost or stolen? So without Intune, you've got no way to wipe it. Potentially, the data could be breached, and it will cause stress and uncertainty. Whereas with Intune, if you've got everything all set up, policies, etc., then you can remotely wipe the device. You can protect the data. You can encrypt the data. So you've just got much more control, and that means that you're much more confident in how you would respond to someone stealing a laptop, for example. So there are a lot of use cases for Intune is a really great product. Next one is Azure AD. Again, the official title is Azure AD Premium P1. Essentially, this is a security gatekeeper. So it gives advanced identity and access management tools that helps protect your business by controlling who can access your data, from where, and under what conditions. So what you can do is you can set up a lot of different rules. But an example would be you only allow sign-ins from UK locations. Again, if you do work globally, then you can adjust those accordingly. A lot of companies might say, actually, all of Europe's fine, but we want to block out Russia, we want to block out China, etc., because they're where a lot of the risks come from. But you can go into quite granular detail with it, so it is really good from that side of things. You can block access unless using a company managed device. So again, you can actually state the devices that are allowed to log in, and everything else won't be able to. And you can also prompt a lot more efficiently for the multi-factor authentication. So and you can state what type of tools they can use and things like that. So it just allows you to really beef up the security, but in a very specific way to what you want as the business. So, and obviously what this does is this stops, or well, reduces phishing attacks, stolen passwords, risky logins, etc. It's all just being done automatically. So it is a really good way of enabling you to sleep well at night, should we say. Also as well, what it does is it means that you set these things up from a top company's perspective. So whenever you bring new users on, they're still overarched with these security protocols that you've probably gone through with your IT support provider, or if you've got internal IT support people. So it's about coming up with the rules of the game, enforcing those for every device, and that's what's really important, as opposed to every time you get a new person having to kind of remember what security you want for those individuals. So it really gives you a lot of control, and it also helps meet compliance, GDPR, etc. So and so it's great for security, great from compliance, and also it tends to save time for both users and your IT team. So it really can be a win from all different angles. And then the main big one that we're going to look at is the conditional access. So again, with this, you can really create different rules on what you want, how you want it. You can even go down to things like trusted networks. So for example, if you've got Wi-Fi in your office, maybe you can associate the Wi-Fi at home, but you can't associate Wi-Fi anywhere else. So it stops people from being able to use them on potentially what you'd call a dirty device that you don't know who's logged into, what kind of tracking there is, etc., etc. You can lock down the actual devices as well, which is really good. So for example, you might have seen on these films, where they'll go into a cyber attack and they'll have a little USB pen drive and they plug it into the device and it suddenly causes World War III kind of thing. Again, you can just lock down certain things like that so that whenever stuff is selected, it won't happen. It won't give any sort of access to either the individual device or the company-wide data. So again, it is really good for that side of things. You set up your standards, so that's really good. So, as I say, there's lots of different features that we can go through, but the important thing, this is the real thing, which one is right for you? Let's look at which one is probably right for you and your business. And the reason we say probably, because there is not an absolute answer, I'm afraid. So, when is standard the right fit for you? When is it good enough? So, when we look at the original question, it's all about we want to just try and get it right for you. So if you've got a relatively small local team, you're not really doing remote or hybrid workers, there's low risk data. So again, the data that most of your people are using, there's low risk. If you were to lose it, would it be the end of the world? Is there customer specific data, etc.? So, all of these things, depending on what business you're in, it's your decision. Also, if you're already using decent third-party tools, and this is the big one, if you're using nothing at all, then yes, premium, some of the business protection that it gives is good. But one of the things is that it's unmanaged. Whereas depending on what IT support provider you're with, if they're using managed tools, then they're much better, because the way they alert, the way that they'll monitor them, the proactiveness, it's so much higher than what any out of the box product would be. So we're not saying that there's anything wrong with business premium products, but they're not necessarily the best. The other thing as well is you don't necessarily want all your eggs in one basket. So this is one of the things, that you just need to be quite careful about, really, when you're deciding on which tools to use and which are the right fit. Also, the other thing is, if you've got all of your staff are on company issued devices, then you can really lock down that device, so you won't necessarily need the different types of security that you can do with the premium. So then when does premium make sense? So if you've got a growing hybrid workforce, definitely. If you've got really sensitive data, client contracts, etc., from a compliance perspective, so GDPR, finance, very heavy legal documents, etc. If you don't have a dedicated IT manager, so if you don't have either an external IT support company that provides that IT manager function, because what you can do is you can sort of get it set up once, and then, obviously you want to review it regularly, but once it's set up, at least there's that kind of baseline of good security in place. So if you're really concerned about ransomware, phishing attacks, etc., and if you've got multiple devices per user, then premium can be really good, because it will spread that security across all of the devices. And so it's not just about laptops and desktops, it's about their mobile devices as well. So also, another good thing is that you can mix and match licenses. So depending on what level of employees you've got and what they're doing, so potentially you might go with frontline workers that need things like Word, Excel, etc., but they don't necessarily have the depth of confidential data that the business might have. Then you could then go with giving them standard, or maybe basic if they just need an email account and access to SharePoint. Whereas then you could go, actually want the management and the remote workers to have premium, and then maybe also your IT and admin staff to have premium, depending on what it is they're doing. So yeah, you can be really flexible with who has what licenses and things. So yeah, overall we would say, depending on what your business is whether it's worthwhile having premium for everyone, some of them, or maybe none of them. It really depends on your business case. And also, now on this, before we do wrap up, this is a sneak peek. So we have been told that the prices are changing basically from the 1st of July 2026. Now, they have just released this, and you'll notice that these are American prices, but the way that Microsoft do what they call their price harmonization, which essentially means that they're going to harmonize the prices across the world. If a price goes up in one place, it's going to ripple out to other places as well. Now, what you can see from this is pretty much all the prices are going up on most of their things, but business premium is actually one of the ones that's staying the same. So say this is in dollars, whereas my previous slide when I spoke about prices was in pounds. But for example, business standard at the moment is $12.50, whereas it's going up to 14, whereas premium is staying static at 22. So then you'd say that actually the gap is slightly smaller. But as with anything in the world, and tend to be with Microsoft, they, you know, there is always chances of prices gradually creeping up. So yeah, just as a real sneak peek, because as I say, they haven't necessarily advertised these to the open market yet. But yeah, so there will be a price rise coming in July, unfortunately. So really quickly before we wrap up, so we are offering a free, no obligation Microsoft 365 license audit. So if you do currently have Microsoft 365 and you want it audited to understand if you're on the right licensing packages, maybe if you just like some help with identifying any security risk gaps, then as I say, you know, we're very happy to offer you a free audit. Again, that's my direct email address, so you can email me. But whilst we're on that, you know, let's connect. Find me on LinkedIn. Always publishing various kind of technology updates and you know, just various things. But a really great place as well would be if you can follow our platform. So we're on all of the main ones, but again, LinkedIn, if you look for Syn-Star IT support, then we can be found on there. So let's go into questions. What have we got? Right, we've got some questions that have come through. Let's just have a look. We've got a message from Michael. So our AV renewal is coming up. If we say that costs £1.50 per user per month, and we already have 365 Defender at £1.50 per user per month, can you suggest how I might pitch? Sorry, but I'll click them all. And justify upgrading from business standard to business premium at an additional £6 per user per month. As it is, I know why I want it, but it's not as obvious as getting a new end user application, for example. Yeah, I mean, again, it depends really. That there are a lot of good security updates and things, but it really depends on the size of your team, because things like Intune, that can be really good from a, as I say, if you lose a device, you can lock it down, etc. But also, if you're replacing a device, then you can just rebuild the profile from what it was on the previous one. So there's lots of good additional features in having things like Intune, but it really depends on the size of your business. Because if it's a certain size, then it will take so much to try and push all these updates out to all the different users. On the flip side, if it's quite a small team and depending on your data, then yes, it could be. But what I would say is if you're only spending £1.50 at the moment for antivirus, I would really question it's things like, so you've got antivirus, but do you have endpoint response, which is so the detect and response really, which is antivirus is great as a bubble around your machine, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't look at what's on the machine for any potential tracking tools and things that have maybe beaten the antiviruses. So again, having a product that also gives you endpoint detection and response and also ransomware and threat protection. So I would more look at what products you've got at the moment. Is that good enough at the low £1.50 a month, or is there potentially some other security that you could be missing out on? But as I say, certainly from a policy perspective, with things like Intune, you do the work once and then the policies will be there to roll out for additional machines. And also, as I say, it covers those additional devices. So if you've got things like mobile devices, then it's one license per user. So, you know, that can really, you know, add up to making some really good savings. So okay, so I hope, as I say, I hope that answers the question. Maybe we need to have a bit more of a conversation just to delve into it, because there are some other bits and pieces. But yeah, difficult to, you know, to say exactly. Right. Here we go. Right. Can you change midterm in an annual contract? Right. So The answer is yes. You can do midterm, and whether that means that you get a credit back, as in if you're on a different type of license, like an E3 or an E5, or whether you want to go up to premium. The other thing that you can do, the good thing with Microsoft is the way they do the licenses is they effectively pool the licenses. So imagine you've got 10 people and you want an extra license. What it will do is it just puts the license into that pool and then you just select which user has that license. So it can be a really good way of evolving and changing it because, what I would say is not necessarily the entire business needs business premium. You could go for differences, albeit if you're just going for an absolute blanket, then business premium is just easier to have and you can upgrade them midterm, or if you're on monthly, it's pretty easy just to dovetail that into your next billing cycle. So, but there definitely is flexibility. Next one, we're on GoDaddy. Is this the same? Unfortunately, no. GoDaddy in itself uses its own tenant. So it's Microsoft, but it's its own tenant. Whereas if you've been set up directly with Microsoft or you've got a direct Microsoft partner, so say, for example, with Syn-Star, we're a direct Microsoft partner. We set all of our clients up on their own Microsoft tenant, and then we're just an administrator for it and we can provide the licenses for it. But it's our client's direct tenant with Microsoft. So it's under their domain name, everything. Whereas with GoDaddy, actually, they do it through theirs. So it is different on the licensing perspective. And as I say, there are quite a few restrictions because of it. But as I say, you'll really need to speak with GoDaddy and find out what you can do and you can change, because it's not exactly how I'm explaining it, because I'm explaining it in terms of you being a direct Microsoft customer, not via GoDaddy and GoDaddy's tenant. So okay, is Intune easy to set up? Well, as with most things Microsoft, with their advanced features and things, for a layman, often you'll look at it and it's relatively confusing, because there's so many ifs and buts with Microsoft setup. So generally we would say you could set it up yourself, but it can be a huge rabbit hole and it might end up taking you days or weeks to try and work it all out, and then it's knowing whether you've actually covered all the bases. So usually we would recommend that you get a Microsoft professional that knows about Intune, to really help and guide you, because what they can normally do is they can normally build out a bit of a map to say, right, here's some of the big features on Intune. How would you like us to do it? And then they can set it up very much to suit your business and what you need. As I say, just things like the geolocation side of things. If you do work across the globe, you need to be you need to be really careful, because you can end up actually restricting people being able to work when it could be correct. Same with if you're using things like VPN. So without getting too technical, if you're using a certain type of VPN, it could end up being blocked, and certain things not work. So yeah, you've just got to be a little bit careful. You can't just go into Intune. It's not a kind of an easy dashboard where you just click a button and say yes to all or whatever. It doesn't really work in that way. You really need to understand the different features and things like that. So yeah, we definitely recommend that you get a professional to do it. So sorry, let's have a look. We just got some other ones coming through. Run a not-for-profit organization, how would this work for us? Again, annoyingly with Microsoft, they used to give you the licenses for free. Now they don't. They give you a basic license for free, so you do have to pay them. Again, depending on what portal and partner you use and buy your licenses through. Again, drop me an email. I'm very happy to, if you wanted me to have a look at your Microsoft tenant, and give you some exact advice, that's not a problem. So, but again, as I say, with not-for-profit, it's difficult because some of the licenses are grandfathered in, so they continue. Others don't. Others have been taken out. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not an exact answer. But do drop me a message, and I can certainly help you on that. Does AI integrate within premium or standard? How it works? Right. So, well, again, I mean, AI, there's hundreds of different tools, but AI, if we talk about Microsoft Copilot, then yes, it's within it, but it is an additional subscription. It's about 20 or so pounds a month per user for full-blown Copilot. So, Copilot, the paid edition, does work within the apps, whereas the free version is just a web-based version. So, yes, there is Copilot within it, and actually, whether you're using premium or standard, it's one in the same. Albeit, what you could do is you could use things like Intune for the configuration of the users and how they're using AI. So because you can actually restrict different apps, you could, if you wanted to stop people from using certain things, then I would say be on premium and use some of the extra security functionality for that. So. Next question. I've used Intune in a previous role. One of its biggest selling points, other than being cloud-based, is that it's easier than using group policy for the same thing. Yes, it is. That's correct. Basically, it's definitely easier than using group policy. But again, this is where it's really difficult, because depending on the size of business and depending on what you're looking to achieve, that's why it's not an exact yes or no. But yes, from a sort of a front-facing perspective, Intune is easier and, would I say, better? It's probably more built for that. Whereas group policy, because of how it was originally built and it was more for an on-premise server, it was just in a different way. Whereas with Intune, it is out of the box as a Microsoft Cloud 365 product. So. Is setup highly priced? Is it included with the license? So setup is generally, you would always do it separate, depending on your Microsoft provider. So who's your IT support company? Do they do it included? As Syn-Star, all of our fully managed support clients, we offer the Microsoft 365, all of the support, the setup, the continuation, all included in the support, and part of our, whether we have things like quarterly QBRs, so quarterly business reviews with that client, we would always be keeping them up to date with Microsoft, what's happening, what changes, what features that we want. So, it really depends. My email address, I'm going to put that back on the screen. So it's just giles@syn-star.co.uk. This is within the chat again. We're getting the Microsoft grant, but don't know who supplies it. So the grants are a difficult one in that often Microsoft will do it themselves. So they do offer support themselves, but again, different grants. It all depends really. I would say there's details on it, and again, depending on what partner level, there may be options to have different help and support for that. So I'm not sure. You'd need to read the small print on your grant, but congratulations for getting a Microsoft grant. So any free money is good money. So but yeah, as I say, there's lots of different licenses and things like that out there. This is more for the business perspective. Obviously, as I say, charities, not for profits, etc. There'll be different options for them. So right, let's have a look. I think we've got another question. Here we go. Right, if I'm paying separately for antivirus, can I just use the free version? So it all depends really. It depends what you're currently paying for. Again, you've got base level antivirus, which is effectively just a bubble over your machine. Hopefully it stops a lot of the main attacks. But the problem is with antivirus is it runs off of a known list. Known list being, we know that virus exists. We know how it gets in, so they then create updates and patches to stop that virus effectively from working. But of course, the problem is with with hackers and with AI is that cyber threats is constantly evolving and they're getting better. So that means that if you've just got standard antivirus, it's not a managed antivirus. It could be out of date, in which case you could have a side door open of your machine. So it's really difficult to kind of compare onions with apples. Again, it comes down to having that conversation with who your IT provider is or what products you're using as to whether you're if it's a similar one, then yeah, move, maybe ditch it, move to Defender. But if it's not a similar one, then we would always kind of say, well, potentially you're going to step down slightly in your cybersecurity, and that's what you don't want. If anything, you just want to make sure that you've tried and got as much protection as you can possibly have, because, as I say, the amount of cyber attacks that are happening are really high. Right, I think looking at the chat, I think that's everything. Yeah, as I say, we've slightly gone over, but it's always good when there's lots of questions and things like that coming through. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time. As I say, please do connect. If you do want us to share this with someone else, drop us an email and we can send you the recording once it's available. And please do share it. Many thanks.